Clements. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to our candidates for coming along. Hopefully you've all expressed an opinion on what questions are most important to you. They're just going to add them up, and that's the order. Apology to the people who submit the Rybank fields. I never saw it, otherwise I have no reason not to include it, but I think we'll be fine having looked at the ticks. And we can make sure to do it. So we're going to start with little opening statements for 3 minutes. I'm going to time keep. I'll let you know when we've got sort of 30 seconds to go. And then we just go through the questions and go around. 2 minutes to reply, and then if anyone wants to respond, you can do that after everyone's done their answer to the questions. Does that make sense? I've just left my phone there for the clock. 1 minute. Right. Who would like to go first? Any volunteers? Yeah, great, thank you.
Okay, hello everybody. I'm Jeff Smith. I'm the Labour candidate for Manchester Withington. Between April and September this year, the Trussell Trust has given out over 823,000 emergency food parcels. This week, Shelter report that 135,000 people, 135,000 children will be living in temporary accommodation on Christmas Day. Hunger and homelessness in 2019 in the world's 5th biggest economy. Britain isn't working for far too many people, so we need a change of approach to make this country a fairer, more prosperous and more sustainable one. We've now had 9 years of cuts from the Coalition and Conservative governments, and our public services are at breaking point. Crimes going uninvestigated in South Manchester because the police have lost 2,000 officers in Greater Manchester since 2010. Nationally, we have record waiting times for the NHS services. Schools are having to close for half days because of lack of funds. We can't go on like this. And a Labour government will invest properly in our communities and in our futures. We'll invest £26 billion in real terms in our NHS to recruit the staff we need to reduce those waiting lists. We'll introduce a real living wage of £10 an hour, and we'll introduce a national care service for older people, and fund education throughout people's lives. We'll pay for it by reversing the cuts in corporation tax, by taxing financial transactions and tax avoiders, and by asking the top 5% to pay a little more. We'll instigate a green industrial revolution, making the most of the opportunities for new technologies and industries, investing in renewables, retrofitting our building stock, and putting us on a path to cut carbon emissions. Boris Johnson called this election on the pretext of delivering Brexit. 75% of people in this constituency voted to remain in the EU, and I was one of them. I still believe that leaving the European Union is an historic mistake. But in order to cancel Brexit, I believe we need a specific democratic mandate, and so I was one of the first MPs to call for a confirmatory vote on a Brexit deal. That's Labour's policy, and the only realistic way to guarantee you another vote on Brexit is to vote Labour. I believe the Labour government will negotiate a better deal than the terrible one that Boris Johnson has brought back. But I don't think there's a better deal than the one we already have, so I'll be campaigning for Remain in any future vote on Brexit. I was born and raised in this constituency. It's where I live, where I shop, where I socialise. I was a local councillor for many years and MP for the last 4, so I understand this area and the effect that 9 years of austerity has had on it. And as an MP, I've had to represent the people who've been hit hardest, so I know how important this election is for local people. We have a choice. More of the same, or a Labour government offering hope and committed to rebuilding our communities. And I hope you'll choose hope and investment with Labour. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to go next?
I went first last time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Hi, I'm Lucy Bannister. I'm the Green Party candidate here in Manchester Withington. And I'm standing in this election because we are on the brink of climate chaos. 11,000 scientists came together earlier this year and they told us that the data was showing that the climate chaos that is coming soon is coming sooner than they ever expected, and the severity is worse than they ever expected. They declared a climate emergency, and they said that we needed to act now if we wanted to avoid untold suffering. Only the Green Party's plan have the policies that will enable us to transform our economy in the way that we need to do to stop this. And only our manifesto will allow us to reach carbon zero by 2030. Labour say it's going to aim to be near carbon zero by 2030. Lib Dems are aiming for 2045. It's just not good enough. And whilst we've been held in political deadlock over Brexit, the planet is burning. The Green Party is putting protecting our planet, protecting our home where we all live, at the heart of everything that we stand for, because we know that we can't just plant some trees while still supporting airport expansion. And we can't just have some cycle lanes while we're still fueling an economy that's based on unlimited expansion and consumerism and more stuff. You can't claim that you're pro our planet when you're pro nuclear weapons. None of the other parties here today actually get it. The Green Party do. We're going to build a new world, a new society. We're going to transform our economy, and we're going to do that by building thousands of social houses over the next 10 years, all up to the highest standards of efficiency and insulation. We're going to transform our transport system. We're going to create thousands of new jobs by investing properly in renewables. And we're going to tackle inequality whilst doing it, because a green future is a better future for everyone. Every green vote on December the 12th is a vote to end the climate chaos. And every green vote is a vote for the kind of future that you want to see, the kind of world you want to live in. And I know what mine looks like.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for having us this evening. My name is Chen Keji from Conservative Party. From my accent, you probably tell I come from China. I come to Manchester in 2003, pursue my engineering degree. I studied in University of Manchester, followed by my MBA in the Manchester Business School. I can see there are so many alumni in the room, which is fantastic. My value is, I believe family is the core of our society. I also believe education is the key to change individuals' social situation. And I also believe as a country facing such difficulties, everyone needs a forward looking. We should look at what's beyond us tomorrow. That can give us an opportunity to look at a global Britain, to look at a global opportunity. If I'm elected, I want to be your hands-on MP. I want to be a hard-working MP. I want to spend all my time look after my local people. My policy around, I think the first one, it has to be policing. Because I have very similar feeling as in the last few years. In South Manchester, there are so many crimes, burglaries, robberies, everything happened in this area. So I think policing is very important to ourselves. And then our NHS also very important. In this area, we have two very good hospitals. We got Withington Community Hospital and also Christine Cancer Research Hospital, which is world-class facilities. And everyone also talk about the schools. Schools are very important. That's our future. We do want to give every opportunity to our children, allow they can open their potential to the future. And also, we have to say, this election is also very important about Brexit. People do not want to sit in the deadlock. People do want to move on. I think last but not least, my policy is about climate emergency. That is vital to ourselves. We do need to tackle the climate change. So that is me, your hardworking, hands-on MP. My policy is about NHS, policing, school, and our climate emergency. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm John Leach from the Liberal Democrats, and I'm unashamedly standing on a platform to stop Brexit. Brexit's bad for Britain and it's bad for Manchester. I wasn't going to stand for Parliament again, but I can't sit by and do nothing to stop the country from spiralling into economic chaos. Only this week we've seen the Foreign Secretary admit that there's still a real chance of a no deal. And this is our last chance to stop Brexit. In 2017, both Labour and the Conservatives stood on a platform to deliver Brexit and then spent the whole of the election saying nothing about it. This was followed by a Parliament that was in chaos and failed to support any sort of Brexit deal. But more importantly, the last Parliament also failed to agree to a people's vote on Theresa May's deal because Labour refused to back it, both in Parliament and here in Manchester. Only the Liberal Democrats are being honest about their approach to Brexit in this election. We want to stop it. We've seen yet another big fat lie on the side of a bus from the Tories claiming they'll get Brexit done. This is only the start of years of negotiation or a chaotic New Deal. Labour claimed they would renegotiate Brexit, but Jeremy Corbyn refuses to say whether Labour would back his own deal. Unfortunately, the polls indicate that the Tories will win the most seats, either there'll be a Tory majority or a hung parliament. That's why it's so vital to have as many Liberal Democrats as possible to deprive the Tories of a majority, because we're the only party that can be trusted to stop Brexit in a hung parliament. And the Liberal Democrats are the only party with a credible manifesto plan to tackle the big issues: the climate emergency, reversing the crisis in health and social care, reversing Tory education cuts, putting community policing back on the streets in every local community, and lifting more people out of poverty through investment in our welfare system. If we stop Brexit, we get a minimum 50 billion Remain bonus to spend on vital services. That's a modest estimate of the extra money we get from staying in the European Union. But it won't be enough to fund our spending commitments. All this has to be paid for, and the Liberal Democrats are the only party with a credible plan to fund their spending commitments. The independent IFS have roundly criticised both Tory and Labour spending plans as not credible, and that both parties would require significant increases in taxes to pay for them. Once again, bribes from the two parties, because they know Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn are not fit to be Prime Minister. We're the only party to balance day-to-day spending with our income and famous transparent tax rises. The only money we would borrow is to invest in long-term capital investment projects, most of which would be specifically targeted to tackle the climate emergency. The Resolution Foundation have confirmed that our plans are the most progressive of all the parties, and they'll lift 600,000 children out of poverty by reversing Tory benefit cuts and building 100,000 social homes every year and increasing the local housing allowance. So if you want an MP who will campaign fully to stop Brexit and make Britain a fairer place to live in, vote for me.
Thank you. Have my little helpers done their maths yet? Are they still working out? Okay. As I'm feeling guilty about having lost the Rybank Fields question, do you want to go first? Have you got? This is what I was just given. Is this? Yeah. Or do you know what you want to? Oh well, bring that up. Reg, have you got that? Can everyone hear? First of all, now we've done that. Is everyone okay to hear? Right. Do you want to use the mics, or are you happy? Can everyone hear? Yeah, I think. Yeah. Okay. Do you want to stand up and say hello and give your question? That Reg has got a look just for.
Have you got the question at hand?
Yeah. Reg, can you pass that to that lady?
Thank you. So I'll do this. Hello. We represent Friends of Rybank Fields, and we'd like to know what are your views on Manchester City Council's adoption of a development framework for Rybank Fields, which will effectively enable Manchester Metropolitan University to sell the land for development with planning permission in place. I ask you to consider and answer each of the following points in your response. Number 1, Rybank Fields is greenfield, not brownfield. According to national and local planning policy, brownfield sites must be prioritised for development. Number 2, Manchester has already exceeded its local housing need target by 5,434 homes. Number 3, Manchester City Council has declared a climate emergency, and Rybank Fields is a much needed green lung for the city. Number 4, local residents are against this development due to valid concerns regarding increased traffic and air pollution, increased flooding, the disturbance of toxic landfill, and the destruction of trees, grasses and wildlife. What will you do to stop this? And number 5, the sale of Rybank Fields is part of a wider problem of the privatisation of public land. Manchester Metropolitan University were gifted this land for sports and recreational purposes only. Do you agree that this is wrong, and how will you prevent it? Thank you.
Can we have that back? Just in case anyone wants to check what the question was.
You only got 2 minutes for this.
Let's see. Right. Are you going to go first?
I'll
Go on,
have to
Joe.
go
Yeah.
first.
Let's flick it on.
I think this is actually the 3rd attempt by MMU to redevelop Rybank Fields. I was not around at the first attempt, and at the second attempt, I can't remember whether I was a councillor or whether I was the MP at the time, but we had Liberal Democrat councillors in Chorlton at the time. And funnily enough, when we had Liberal Democrat councillors in Chorlton, the Labour councillors didn't think that redeveloping Rybank Fields was a good idea. Now there's 3 Labour councillors in Chorlton Ward. The council adopted the proposal to build on this land. In fact, one of the Chorlton councillors at the time actually voted for it. And I was the only person who actually spoke out against the redevelopment of Rybank Fields. And the only comment I recall being said by someone who's actually in this room, I think, was that he objected to them being described as executive homes and thought they should be described as larger family homes instead. I don't think this site should be redeveloped. I think the small number of green open spaces that we have in heavily residential areas should be looked after and cherished. I'm going to slightly disagree with you. I may be wrong, but I'm fairly certain that this land is actually classified as brownfield rather than greenfield site. I thought it was classed as brownfield site, but I could be wrong. I certainly have been misled in that case. But actually, even if it was a brownfield site, it's actually a green field. And I think it opens up a whole different issue about how we designate green and brownfield sites. Because there's plenty of green fields that are actually classed as brownfield sites. I don't think this site needs to be redeveloped. I think it's outrageous that MMU are just trying to make money out of it when it's open green space. I hope Trafford are still refusing to open up the road from their end, because I don't think in traffic terms this should be allowed to go ahead. And when it goes through the planning process, I will be fighting it all the way in the council.
Good.
Okay, look, I understand the significant concerns that local people have about the development. I don't think it would be the choice of any of the local councillors or myself. But I think we have to be realistic about what's achievable. Because there seems to be an assumption that if the councillors object, the MP objects, the council turn it down, that's the end of the matter. But the council operates under planning law, and so the council has to have good reasons to turn a development down if the developer has the right to develop. Now, it appears that MMU have the right to develop land. I think there is a question of whether it's designated as a brown or greenfield. But we've not seen anything that seems to stop MMU having a legal right to develop the plan. Now, I am unconvinced by the plans for it. Certainly when I first saw the plans, I thought that is not an acceptable development, certainly in terms of the traffic. I did not see how the traffic would work. But if you just say now, we're not going to engage with MMU, we're going to just object to their initial plan, eventually they may put that in, it may be rejected by the council, it may go to, it'd be either the planning inspector or the Secretary of State, and it may be, that decision may be overturned. So, I support what the local councils are doing, which is actually trying to engage with MMU to get, if you like, the least unacceptable development. So, to get protection for the Nico ditch and the mature trees, to make sure there's a mixed tenure site. And when that engagement has happened, and a planning application is put in, we'll assess it and see if it's something that we think is supportable or not supportable, and we will make representations to the council when we've seen the plan. I just think we have to be realistic about, and we have to deliver for the community the best achievable option, and that it may be impossible to stop development, but if there's going to be a development, we need to look at how we make it the least unacceptable development of that land.
Hustings should be fact-checked.
Sorry?
There should be fact-checked in Hustings. It's a greenfield site.
Well, I understand that is a discussion.
If you can sit there and talk about protecting people against biodiversity and wanting to build on top of a greenfield site, it's nonsense.
Would you like to go next?
Yeah. Thank you for this question. For me, absolutely no. I don't support this. I don't support this idea. We shouldn't develop our greenfield. There are so many brownfield areas we can invest. And also, to be honest, when we talk about climate emergency, why we digging the greenfield, build a bloody house? We should reconsider the brownfield area. And then, secondly, when people talk about affordable housing and also investment into university, yes, we should do that. But when you do such kind of project, you can only put up the housing price high and make the whole nearby area become extremely crowded, extremely difficult for humans to stay. And if you think about air pollution, this project will not solve air pollution. It can only give even worse air pollution. So I absolutely support the protest. We shouldn't have this project at all.
Thank you. So I am against this development. I think it's not a good idea. We are basically building on greenfield sites already with developers coming in.
It's just so much easier to hear.
Use the mic.
Okay, yeah, of course.
Just flick the switch.
Yeah, we'll do.
Start it well. Great, there we go.
What we have seen, even with the surveyors coming in over the last few days, is habitats being disrupted and the ground being pulled up, and ultimately it's just demonstrating what is going to come over the next few years if we allow this to go ahead. There's lots of brownfield sites in the area that I think we could develop instead, and that's what we need to be focusing on. This is a biodiverse green space that is used by the community, and that's what we need to be protecting here. I think it's really, really disappointing that MMU has not recognised its social responsibility here, and it's profiteering off this land, allowing it to be used for more expensive housing, more private development. If it were a good place to develop, and I don't believe it is, then I would expect them to be giving it to the council to allow them to build social housing on it. But that's not what we're seeing at all, and so I'm really disappointed that the council, when it said it's in a climate emergency and also said it's serious about social housing, is supporting this whatsoever.
Thank you.
Are we able to come
Yeah.
I just wanted to come back on one particular point, and that's about the planning process. The council is facilitating this development by having designated it for redevelopment of executive homes. And In the same way in Didsbury, where they changed the strategic planning framework on the Christie Hospital site so that they could then get away with building a huge tower block. They have done again in Chorlton, they've changed the planning framework to actually support the proposal. So when it comes to the planning department, it will then be far harder to resist the application being approved because the council has already, in principle, approved that it's fine for development.
Thank you.
Questions? Andrew, you number 18. Number 18, you submitted about climate change.
Yes, thank you very much. Oh yes, that's right. The International Panel on Climate Change has declared that we need to reduce our CO2 emissions by 45% in the next decade to avoid catastrophe. How does your party plan to meet this target?
Well, cutting emissions will inform all of Labour's policy in the next... Sorry. Cutting emissions will inform all of Labour policy through the next election. It will inform our transport policies, our housing policy, our energy policy. We plan to create a sustainable investment board which will bring together the Chancellor, the Business Secretary and the Governor of the Bank of England, and we'll ask the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, to include climate and environmental impacts into all its forecasts. So it will run through all of the policies that we have and all the developments that we bring forward. We will introduce what we call a National Transformation Fund. We will rewrite the rules of the Treasury to make sure that all its spend is in line with climate targets. In terms of the actions we'll take, firstly, I suppose there's some three main areas. Firstly, we'll have a major retrofitting buildings programme. Nearly all of the 27 million homes in Britain will be eligible for a retrofit. 56% of energy used in this country is related to the energy used in buildings. So that's a major important part. In terms of energy production, we will invest in renewables. We'll build 7,000 new offshore wind turbines. We'll lift the Tories' ban on onshore wind turbines and build 2,000 of those. We will deliver 90% electricity and 50% of heat from renewable and low carbon sources by 2030. And we'll invest in solar panels and tidal energy. So a big programme of investment in energy and in transport as well. That will inform our transport policy in terms of our getting cars off the road, making sure that fossil fuel vehicles are phased out, and investing in public transport to make sure that we have green public transport that's powered electrically. So if you look at the Labour Party manifesto, it is the first section of our manifesto is our green industrial revolution. It will create jobs, it will cut emissions, and it will make this country more sustainable. And that approach to our policy runs through the entire manifesto that we have produced for this election.
Great, thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, great. Thank you. The question about climate emergency. I probably have a more credibility than other people talk about this question because I am an engineer working in the clean energy sector.